Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake and I am super excited to talk about this one with all of you. This is the 2023 Nissan Z. Yes, Nissan has brought the Z back. They started with the 350 and the 370 in more recent years, and then we didn't know what was going to go on, and they did this. And to start, I think it looks fantastic. We first saw these cars back last August in Brooklyn, New York at a little reveal event. We got to see them, we got to sit in them, but we didn't get to drive them. So I've had the privilege of spending about a week with this one, and cannot wait to talk about how it drives in just a second. But first, let's talk all about what the 2023 Nissan Z is and give you a little tour of everything. All right, so first of all, what is the 2023 Nissan Z? Well, in Nissan's press release, they say the new Z is new and modern, yet still familiar, which is a great way of kind of talking about the fact that this is not on an all-new platform. This is more or less a 370Z that they rebodied and reskinned, and they tweaked a little bit of the suspension geometry. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's starting with the 370Z as a base, which is frankly not a terrible thing. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail in the driving portion of all this. But drivetrain-wise, this is not a 370Z. They have a different motor in here. It started life in the Infiniti Q60 Red Sport. It is a VR30DDTT, if I'm getting that right. No one will care about that, but what you do care about, it is 3 liters. It makes 400 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. It makes all that horsepower at 6,400 RPM, and the torque comes in at 1,500 and holds on all the way to 5,200. It is a twin turbocharged motor that can make a maximum of 15 pounds of boost. And that is paired to a 6-speed manual, which is standard, or a 9-speed torque converter automatic, available on both the base trim or the performance trim. This is a performance trim, sort of. We'll come back to that in just a second. If you get a performance trim car, you get a mechanical limited slip diff as standard. Now, I mentioned this was a performance pack car, which it is, but it isn't, because this is actually a Proto Spec car. And before they turn off, I want to stop, come back to that, but I love these taillights. Design-wise, I tend to not talk about design on this channel because everyone loves and hates different things, but these are my favorite element of this entire car's design. Nissan pulled a lot of retro touches from a lot of different generations of Z, and these taillights in particular are my absolute favorite detail of the whole car. They look tremendous in the daytime or at dusk, kind of like when I'm filming now. They look even better at night, and the turn signal is amber and right under it. It's just a cool touch. Anyway, performance trim versus not versus what the heck this actually is. This is a Proto Spec, which is kind of emulating the prototype car that Nissan originally teased. And what you get with the Proto Spec is a performance trim, so you get all the mechanical extra goodies of the performance trim. The biggest difference is some of the cosmetic stuff. So you can see with the wheels here, these are the 19-inch raised wheels that you get on the performance car. They are 9.5 inches wide in the front, 10 inches wide in the back, and you get some Bridgestone summer tires on them, but in this case they are bronze. And I'll show you the interior in just a second, but a lot of the stuff is carried through to the interior. Those are the other big benefits of the Proto Spec car. The other thing you'll notice with these wheels, you've got yellow painted brake calipers. That is unique to the Proto Spec. Now, the brakes themselves are a 14-inch front rotor and a 13.8-inch rear rotor. You've got a 4-piston front caliper up there and a 2-piston caliper going on in the rear. So I think it's plenty of brake. I heard some rumblings at the reveal last August that, oh, I can't believe they didn't go bigger. And honestly, it's plenty of brake. You don't need more. Other interesting things going on with the performance trim in particular, I mentioned every performance car, regardless of transmission, does get that limited slip differential back here. You also get some aero bits going on, notably this rear spoiler on the deck lid. So this is exclusive to the performance trim, and Nissan says it helps with rear stability at higher speeds. I did not do any high speed testing on the interstate to validate that. I'm sure Nissan appreciates that. There's also a little front lip spoiler going on that is part of this little aero package that they say is inspired from the GTR. And then the other final piece, while I'm back here with my knee next to it, that comes on the performance trim is a different exhaust. You get these different tips, and I believe it's a different muffler going on. So those are kind of the differences with the performance package. Let's take a little tour of the interior and talk about what is going on in there, what's different with the Proto Spec, and all that good stuff. And then we'll talk about how this thing is to drive. All right, I mentioned some of these big tweaks for the Proto Spec in particular were with the interior. So let's take a look at those and just see the interior in general. So the Proto Spec gets these kind of unique seats going on with the yellow inlays in the center and the yellow stripes on the sides of them. You can also see the yellow stitching on the center console and the shift boot. That's kind of what you get inside here for the Proto Spec. As far as the performance cars in general, these seats will be the same seats, but with a different covering. You can have black, red, or blue, and the blue is really, really cool. The seats are unique to the performance car. The base car will get a slightly different seat. You've got manual adjusters here for your seat height. You can adjust the front and back, and then in a throwback all the way to the Infiniti G35 days, these two controls move your power for the seat forward and back, and the seat back adjustment. So kind of interesting they kept those. Other things you'll recognize for older Nissan and Infiniti controls include these heated seat switches over here, the S mode control, which used to just be for the auto rev matching over here. You'll see the climate control down here. These are just 3 regular dials that have been in Z cars for a while. And then if you head up here to the top of the dash, these are some gauge pods that have been around for a little while as well. And that all continues, you know, throughout parts of the interior with things like the window controls and all that. But honestly, I don't care, because when you're driving, you know, you want things that are tactile and easy to find and touch and use by feel. And all of this going on in here is very easy to use while you're driving. So I don't care about the old controls. They actually work pretty well. So everyone stop complaining if you're planning on it. Anyway, let's hop inside, because looking right here, this is a new steering wheel. This is a kind of a slightly dished wheel going on, and these are physical buttons that move with touch controls sort of going on. They move. It's like one big panel, and you can push it in different places, and then these are physical buttons here. So this controls your center screen. This is a fully digital center gauge cluster here. If I close the door, you can see more information. And you can configure a few different views for this cluster. It's all fine. I don't really care about digital clusters a lot of the time, but some people do. Moving over here to these 3 pods, like I said, these are not, you know, new, but you get your boost gauge, your turbo speed gauge, and a readout for voltage, which is nice to have. And then pulling down here a little bit below your vents, this is the new Nissan infotainment system. I first used a variant of this in the new Pathfinder, and I actually thought it was totally fine, totally snappy. It's got a real volume knob that's easy to find at night, which I love. Wireless CarPlay, which is great to have, and wireless Android Auto if you use Android instead. And you can get back out to, you know, different things here. This is all pretty basic. I don't think a lot of people are gonna, you know, use this too much, but you can certainly use the Nissan system if you want. But, you know, Apple CarPlay works just fine. Looking further down, I mentioned the HVAC controls are a little old school, but again, they work fine and they're out of the way. And you know, it's not a lot of digital stuff going on in here, which I like. You've got a USB-C port and a USB-A port, which is lovely because you're guaranteed compatibility with any device that you're going to encounter. This is your delightful 6-speed manual transmission. The Proto Spec gets a unique shift knob, but they're all going to be, you know, kind of like this. You've got one cup holder going on right here, and then you can just slide this guy back and get a second one if you want the armrest a little further back for another drink. And then here is your center armrest. Not a ton of space, but there's something. And then looking behind the front seats, you've got these cubbies, and you can pull that back and store some paperwork for an event you host and forget about it. So that's that. And then looking further back in the hatch, it is a fairly good size hatch. You do have this metal beam here that runs across. That's kind of been a thing with the Z cars for a long time. It's for chassis stability and strength. But in general, you know, this is, I think, enough space for one of these. I like the fact that it's kind of a hatchback, so you can get a lot of stuff in it. All right, so let's talk about driving the 2023 Nissan Z. All right, so first of all, there's your sound. This VR30DDTT, if I got that right, I think sounds really good at full tilt. At idle and at lower RPMs, it's a little bit of a nothing burger for sound compared to the Toyota Supra, which we're going to talk about a lot, not because this is a comparison video, but just it's the natural competitor. Sounds good when you're at full tilt. My first 60 miles driving this car were in Washington, D.C. in bumper-to-bumper traffic in first and second gear, and it was miserable. I was not having a good time. I was really not having it, but that's kind of any manual transmission car in heavy traffic. And this car in particular, I want to talk about city driving for a second, because the throttle mapping in this is fine once you're on the move, but in city traffic, that's where it kind of irritates, in that The throttle itself is easy to deal with, but the way this engine builds boost, it just comes on really hot and heavy, and it can be a lot if you're trying to just do the slow speed crawl sort of dance, you know, at 5:30, getting through traffic to go run an errand or get home from work or whatever. But once you're on the open road, things are better. I had this car for our Rainbow Road track cross, which was at Summit Point Motorsports Park. Unfortunately, Nissan did not allow me to track this car for a variety of reasons that they wouldn't really confirm, but I can guess between liability and consumables and whatever else. But on the plus side, near any racetrack, there are always good back roads, and I did get some good back road driving in on top of highway driving to and from where Summit Point is. So a lot of good drive time in the car. I put 380 miles on it, and on back roads, this car really comes alive. Once you get out of the city, you know, everything control-wise feels really good. I like the steering a whole lot. It feels really, really good, really direct. I like the shifter. It's a little heavy, a little high effort, but that's okay. It kind of goes with this whole car's vibe as far as being very analog. The clutch is pretty easy despite having feel and having some heft to it. It doesn't wear you out. It's just not like an on-off switch. There's a little bit of meat to it, which is great. The brakes feel really good. Good initial bite, good pedal travel. It's nice and progressive. It's all very predictable. Where I don't necessarily love this car on back roads is the suspension. It is generally a good handling car in the sense that it's confidence inspiring. You can throw it through some turns. It feels really good. Anything that's more of a sweeper sort of turn, it feels really good in. When you get those random turns where you try to carry some speed and some momentum, but they're probably a slower turn that might be a little sharp, I'm thinking like a 20 to 30 mile an hour turn, you can just every so often feel that this car is like a little undersprung or something, where it just feels remarkably soft out of nowhere. And that's fine. Compared to the Supra feels a little more sharp and poised in those scenarios, but that's going to come at the expense of ride quality because, you know, despite the Supra having adaptive dampers, I think it rides just a little firmer everywhere than the Nissan Z does. The Z, to me, feels really good. It's a comfortable highway cruiser. This is a car where I think you could do, you know, a couple hundred miles in a day easily and be very comfortable. And, you know, Nissan's trying to pull it off with a fixed rate damper. You get a different suspension setup on the performance car, which is what this is, versus the base car, but they're not adaptive or adjustable dampers at all. So it is what it is, but I do think they are generally well set up. There's just random moments where things feel a little soft to me. Now, that being said, the recent Z cars, the 350 and the 370, have been pretty popular with a variety of, you know, motorsport enthusiasts, whether you're looking to get into drifting or track days or autocross or some combination of all of that. And you know, the nice thing is the aftermarket support is huge. So if you buy one of these and if you take it to a track day or to autocross or, you know, whatever you get into, I suspect these won't become drift cars until they're 20 years old, but whatever you get into with it, if you happen to find it a little soft in places, I do think the aftermarket support for these is going to be really, really strong, as it has been for the prior generations of Z car. So, you know, that is not necessarily a bad thing, and I think in general Nissan's got this set up pretty nicely for people who are going to be driving these daily, which is to say you're driving it to work, you're driving it on the weekends, you're taking it on a road trip, and you're looking to have a comfortable ride and just use it as a car. And then when you press it into service on those back roads, on those racetracks, it is competent enough. The other nice thing about it being a little soft, which is the flip side of this whole coin, is that I think it's actually kind of playful and a little more fun versus something that's super sharp. People have two very distinct preferences on setup, just in general with cars, and I have learned that I like soft cars that are, as my friend John will say, they're kind of like dumb golden retrievers in that they just want to please you and they will just like roll over and do whatever you want. And this feels a little bit more like that, and it's just easy. Whereas a car like the Supra is poised and sharp and precise and really, you know, the limits are going to be a little higher and it's going to be perhaps higher performing, but it doesn't quite feel as outright fun in a lot of regards, which is just a very fascinating dichotomy. If you want that, the Supra's going to be that. This is not going to be that. The Supra also feels faster. Despite this making 400 horsepower, this weighs 3,500 pounds and change, and it is, it's fast enough, but it's not that. The Supra's got more of it in how it makes its power and how it feels. So, you know, again, just a slight difference, but that is a feeling that it provides. All that to say, this is a really fun car. I don't really have a lot of drive time in the 370. My one college roommate had a 350 that I drove and rode in a bit, obviously many years ago now. And, you know, I think that is obviously a different car than this, but, you know, kind of the same ethos was applied back then as they applied to this today. It is still a fun car. Like I said, it's just so eager to please, and I really enjoy it. You know, even now, just being on a beautiful 2-3 lane road by the water, just cruising, it's comfortable, it's pleasant, and, you know, it's everything's kind of out of the way. Visibility in here is excellent. The dash is nice and low. The door sills are nice and low. Looking out the back if you need to, all of that, good visibility. So really appreciate the way they've done everything in here. And then on top of it, you know, the styling in photos is very divisive. I think in person, it really works. The side profile of this car is tremendous. I drove through DC to get dinner a few nights ago and kept catching myself, this was at night, kept catching myself staring as I pulled up to red lights, looking out the window at the car's reflection in the glass of the buildings that I was driving in front of, because the side profile of it is just that good. And I mean, Nissan is pulling on the heartstrings of everyone here. The emotional appeal of this car is so strong. So really appreciate that. And the fact that it's good to drive is, you know, expected and required, but it's good to drive in a fun way. So I appreciate how they've got it set up. Is it as sharp and as poised as the Supra that it is, you know, officially, unofficially competing against? I don't think so, but am I mad about it? Not at all. All right, that is it for this review of the 2023 Nissan Z Proto Spec with 6-speed manual transmission. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe right here on YouTube if you think this was worth your watch. You can also give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to join a community of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a whole group of people, both online and in person, who would love to get to know you. We've got events going on in person for the remainder of the year, online all the time, and we're already planning our schedule for 2023, so we'd love to have you join us for any and all of that. Till next time, please stay safe, be well. We'll see you again soon.